Good evening and welcome to the March 2nd, 2022 meeting for the Murfreesboro Planning Commission. We will call the meeting to order. We do have a quorum present tonight. Everyone is here. And our first item of business is to approve the minutes of the February 16th, 2022 Planning Commission meeting. So if everyone had a chance to review those, if you have any additions or corrections, please state that. If not, we'll be ready for a motion.
Motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
Motion is second. All in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, next we have public hearings and recommendations to the City Council. We have one item, one public hearing tonight. It is a proposed amendment to the zoning ordinance pertaining to the following. Section 2, the interpretation and definitions. Section 18, regulations of general applicability. Section 25, temporary and accessory structures and uses. Section 34, floodplain zoning. And Chart 2, minimum lot requirements, minimum yard requirements, and land use intensity ratios, including Chart 2 endnotes. The City of Murfreesboro Planning Department is the applicant. Mr. Blomley is the planner, and he is not with us this evening, so I believe Ms. Green is going to handle it for us.
Yes, ma'am. Mr. Blomley and Mr. McKnight are attending a conference this evening, and this is really an ordinance amendment that they spearheaded, and so they've filled me in on some of the background and asked that I present it to you. As proposed is an amendment to the ordinance, and although you read 5 bullet points, there are really basically 3 subjects that are proposed to be amended. And if you'll permit me, I'd like to go through the 3 of them and give you some background information, although I think you were introduced to it during the workshop. The first is to consider amending the zoning ordinance for the maximum building height for industrial buildings. Currently in our industrial district, the maximum building height is 75 feet. And I think Mr. Blomley is attempting to be proactive and anticipate that there might be an industrial user in the future that would like to have an accessory structure be taller than the principal structure. And so they're proposing to you that you include a provision in the zoning ordinance allowing accessory structures in those districts to have a maximum building height of 100 feet. If they are accessory to use, that's allowed. There are some additional setbacks. Councilman LaLance had asked for some additional research, and Mr. Aguilera, who's in the audience tonight, he's on our staff, polled 10 cities and put together a handy-dandy chart, which I think that you'll find useful, seeing what other communities do, because I believe that was the question: how do other communities handle this? And these 10 other cities in the state of Tennessee, none of them permit accessory structures to be taller than principal structures. Most of them have heights lower than 75 feet, but the larger cities do allow taller structures. And if you looked at the chart, you can see some communities regulate for stories. As a loose rule, when I convert stories to building heights, I say the first floor is 15 feet and each additional floor is 10 feet. That's usually a few feet over, but it's a good number to go with. So if you saw they regulated 3 stories, then I would say that would be a 35-foot height, generally speaking. And so you have that chart. It gives that information for you of the 10 other cities in our community. Mr. Aguilera is prepared to answer any questions. He just read their ordinances and kind of put this together for you for reference. And so the amendment would be specific to those accessory structures. If I can, I'll move to the second part of the amendment, and it's for maximum height of light fixtures at recreational fields. 2 years ago in 2020, the Planning Commission City Council amended the zoning ordinance to allow recreation fields in the park zone or the P zone to have a maximum height of 80 feet. In the past, we did require applicants, the City of Murfreesboro in the park zone, soccer fields, to go to the Board of Zoning Appeals to seek a variance, a height variance. And in planning practice, if you know that something needs to change, it is a better scenario to have it allowed under certain conditions than to require the BZA each time to review it if it's something you want to allow. We also believe that light technologies come a long way from metal halide to LED now. You can have light fixtures that the light can be more easily thrown interior to the site, and it can be controlled and manipulated better as LED fixtures. And so the zoning ordinance was changed so that specific to park zones, recreation fields could have an 80-foot maximum height for light fixtures. That is much higher than anything else in the city of Murfreesboro. Generally speaking, 20 feet is the maximum height, 16 feet for residential, 20 feet for commercial. But if you have commercial buildings over 35 feet tall, then the light fixtures can be 30 feet maximum. So if you think of some of those industrial developments on Joby Jackson, their light poles will be 30 feet. But if you're like me and you're going to Siegel Soccer Field a couple times a week, the practice fields are 80 feet tall. Now, this ordinance amendment takes that concept and applies it more broadly. So Mr. Blomley is proposing that that 80-foot maximum be allowed not just in park zone, but also in other zones that allow recreation fields. Let them have 80 feet tall fixtures as well, because currently a recreation field would be limited to that 20-foot light pole like you see in the rest of the city. But Mr. Blomley is proposing that 80 feet be allowed specific to the recreation field, and then going a little further and saying that recreation fields that are on 50 acres or more and 300 feet from the property line can go even further to have a 100-foot light pole. And I think this is probably in response to a large recreation development that's proposed on Northwest Broad Street. I haven't been involved in that planning or that process or know what their needs really are, but Mr. Huddleston probably has questions, or if you have questions, probably could answer it later. I do know that our staff are going to go visit the facilities to see what they're really like. So this part of the ordinance amendment, it says that throughout Murfreesboro, where recreation fields are allowed, they could be 80 feet tall as opposed to the 20. And then if they're 50 acres and 300 feet from properties zoned or used for residential purposes, they can go up to 100 feet. So that's a little taller than what we have in Siegel. And then the third part of the zoning ordinance amendment that they prepared is regarding floodplain zoning. And the city of Murfreesboro participates in FEMA's flood insurance program, and we have those firm maps, and lots of you are familiar with the firm maps. Those firm maps identify properties that should buy insurance for flooding from the rivers. And so the state of Tennessee also has an employee whose job is to make sure that the communities that participate in this program are in compliance. FEMA creates a model ordinance, suggests guidelines and standards that communities should adopt. And we did hear from the state representative suggesting some specific changes to our ordinance so that we can comply with that model ordinance. I believe they communicated that to Mr. Huddleston, Mr. Sam Huddleston. And tonight what you have is that prepared in ordinance form. And we're asking you to adopt that so that we can update our information and stay in line with what that model ordinance, the FEMA ordinance, requires. So it is a recommendation based on the state's representative for the flood program in Murfreesboro. So this is all one public hearing to consider these three different matters. If you have any questions either before or after the public hearing, Mr. Aguilera and I would be happy to answer them to the best of our ability, or Mr. Huddleston. The action needed, you can take one action or you can take multiple actions depending on what feedback you may get regarding the text ordinance amendments. So you should conduct a public hearing prior to making your recommendation to City Council.
Margaret Ann, can you tell me the lights that are at Siegel? When you say they're 80 feet, and I don't know, they may have all adjusted. I actually was by there last night on Leanna Swamp. Mm-hmm. Those, I'm assuming, are definitely 80 over on the Jordan Farm part.
The west side, yes, the Jordan Farm.
Are the other ones taller than that, I assume? Or
the older ones, I don't believe, are 80 feet tall. The new ones at the practice fields, which are closest to Swamp Leanne on the west side, are the 80-foot tall fixtures.
Okay.
And are those, when you have an 80-foot tall fixture, do they require a certain type of light? You know, I know a lot of times when we're doing things within the city, we require the light to stay within the property, you know, and not be brought out, you know, so you have directional lighting. Does that happen when you have an 80-foot tall fixture or a 100-foot tall fixture?
I had the same questions that I asked Mr. Blomley and Mr. McKnight today. I wanted them to help me understand how those would apply, because our zoning ordinance says that you can't exceed half a foot candle beyond the property line, and that's one standard, and that one's fairly easily met. But there's also a standard in our zoning ordinance that says you can't produce glare, and you need to have a 35-degree cutoff shield. So what that means, if you have a fixture on the wall It needs to have a down shield that points the light down instead of straight across, because we've had scenarios in our community where fixtures don't exceed the foot candles, but you can see that bulb, and I mean, this is probably not the best term, but I call it the naked bulb test. If you can see a light bulb, then it causes glare. So we don't want it to be a problem for drivers or people on their back decks or patios or people enjoying their area. So when I asked Mr. Blomley about that, he said he wrote it so that it does require adherence to our glare policy and our photometric policy. Go ahead.
For the what it's worth column here, I drove by there last night and was actually shocked by how little light dispersion there was. I mean, if you drive down, just take a minute and drive down through there, it's actually kind of amazing. It is dark the moment you set off that field.
Wow.
I mean, it's kind of almost strangely dark, you know, right over there. Now, I would want to know though, I think maybe what you were asking is to make, you know, what we're using out there, I think are those LED lights, and, you know, they're only a little panel about that big that, you know, kind of shine straight down. Is that what we kind of require in our photometric and glare policy?
I think that lighting just happens to suit the city of Murfreesboro very well, and they said they reached out to our Parks and Rec, and they said they worked really well. The legacy sports fields are, from what I understand from my conversation today, are different than ours. They're more of an elevated skill level, so they need different types of lights. Because I asked, why do you need 100 feet when 80 feet seems to work really well? And according to the information I got, it's because they're more of a professional level where they hit balls higher, they go further, they need more light to disperse further than we need for like our soccer fields. And so it's a different caliper, I guess, is what Mr. McKnight shared with me. It's a different caliper of playing, and so that's why they're saying they need that taller light.
May I ask, you had mentioned if they're requiring to go, or they're asking to go from 80 to 100 feet, that they, you know, that there would be a certain amount of distance between them and another property line. Does that measure center to center property line, or is that property line to property line? How do they measure that?
Let me look real quick.
I think it's light to edge of property line. I think it's the light, not the
Really?
Is it?
property. Well, it says as long as it is located 300 feet, and I think it's to the property line.
Such fixtures are located 300 feet. Yeah, it's the fixtures, not the property line.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions before we open the public hearing? Okay, and for the public hearing tonight, we will open the public hearing and ask anybody to come forward that would like to speak. If you would like to speak about this item, please come to the podium, state your name and your address, and you will have 3 minutes to make any comments you wish to make regarding this particular item. Please make all your comments directly to the Planning Commission, not to other members of the audience and/or any developers or other people we have in the audience this evening. So with that, we will open the public hearing and ask anybody to come forward that would like to speak regarding this item. Anybody at all? Okay. We'll close the public hearing and ask if there are other questions or concerns that we need to discuss before we take a vote. Yes, Mr.
For me,
LaLance.
I don't want to elongate this, but I'll just tell y'all, so I'll tell you kind of where I am. I'm good with the floodplain zoning piece of this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm ready to go on that one. The first portion where we got the other information, it looks like we're already high on our maximum height number.
You're talking about the other information we got from other cities?
Yes,
Okay.
sorry, it looks like we're already, if you kind of go down through that list, we're already pretty high, and I already had a little bit of heartburn about the 100-foot on the accessory building, or the taller structure on the accessory structure, so I either need to get a little bit more information for me to be comfortable with what to do
Agree.
on that, to either defer it, or I'll just vote against it if everybody else has all the information they need. However we want to work, however you guys want to deal with that. And then the light fixtures, I feel a little bit like I want to get a little bit more information on that too, because I'm a little bit worried about the idea of, you know, what kind of lights are we really talking about here? And we're talking about making them higher, and if we're talking about making them like the ones that are at, you know, the football stadium or something that really don't have that same category of light, I might want to look at something that's a little farther than 300 feet from a residential piece of ground. And so maybe we have, you know, speaking of that specific development, where we have some that are 80 feet that are LED for the perimeter out there, and then as you get closer to the interstate and the interstate and highway, that, okay, maybe I would be okay with opening that up, but I don't know what any kind of layout looks like. But I don't think I'd want to put stadium lights 300 feet, 100 yards from a house. So I probably need a little bit more info on that one for me again personally too, and that could conceivably happen between, will this go to council?
This goes to city council.
So it could conceivably happen between now and council for my purposes, but for you guys, I'll let y'all sort of decide how you want to do
I
that.
personally would kind of echo your comments, and just think that maybe we might need to hear a little more information about it, understand a little bit more, and, you know, there might be other information that would make us think, oh, yeah, okay, well, in that case, that seems okay. But I don't think at this point, and especially with the extra legwork that was done to put together information for us about the way it is in other cities, I feel like, you know, we want to just, I think we need to spend as much time as we feel like we need to make sure we do this right. If we're going to make changes, we need to get them right.
So y'all okay to?
So let's confirm which, so Section 2 and Section 18, we don't have any. And Section 34, we're
all good on that.
good on those.
Yes.
Is anything we're saying sound like anything that falls in Section 2, Section 18, or Section 34?
I think interpretations might have some flood stuff in it. I need to take a look at that.
Okay, so
did
we
Mr.
need to hold up on Section 2. Mr. Huddleston, would you like to give us a little more information here tonight?
Good evening, Chair Jones,
Appreciate it.
members of the Planning Commission. Appreciate the opportunity maybe just to provide a little bit of commentary on the industrial height.
Sure.
Historically in Murfreesboro, we have not seen principal structures in the industrial zone for industrial uses at really close to 75 feet. But we have seen and continue to get inquiries about accessory structures, and these would be storage bins or mechanical equipment, could be a water storage tower that would be necessary for fire protection in some locations. And by the zoning ordinance, and I'll have Mr. Ives to help me on this part of it, but by our zoning ordinance, there is not a hardship if a manufacturer has a need for something taller than the height allowed, even as an accessory structure. And so I believe we have granted height variances for industrial properties for accessory structures, but really it's not a hardship. And so we've had a couple of inquiries about some properties through our economic development connections and programs with the chamber, and one of the questions on a couple of those was these particular targets, industrial targets, needed to have something higher than our standard height for accessory structures. This wasn't for the principal structure, but it was for an accessory structure that would be related to equipment or storage silos and mechanical equipment. So that was reason for staff bringing this forward would be to give us a little bit more opportunities on some of those industrial economic development opportunities.
And are those things that I guess other cities are not encountering? Is that,
I'm not sure,
What or are we talking about two different things?
Mr. Aguilera is in the office, or in the audience. I'm not sure if he asked the question specifically about how do you deal with accessory structures that might be higher than the principal structure in their ordinance.
He's got a third page, table
It says
2.0, that has that.
Every single one of them is cannot exceed maximum height, cannot exceed maximum height, cannot, so they're all matched up to, that's kind of what I was looking at. I mean,
Yes.
there are only a couple of them are higher than us.
Yeah, and we haven't checked any of these local communities, but I can tell you we have accessory structures that are higher than some of their heights at some of our industrial facilities.
So look,
If that makes sense to you, we already have accessory structures higher than some of the standards that are in there for some of our neighboring communities.
higher than what they allow?
Higher than what they
Yeah,
allow.
well, some of them are.
As well as higher than what our max height is as well.
Wow.
But those were managed by variances,
And I think that's the best way to do this, to be honest with you guys. I mean, I'd be okay with considering it on a one-by-one basis, and it doesn't seem like there's that many that this would apply, that we would have to change the entire ordinance just to allow anybody to come in and do it, to me.
Well, if I may, the variance structure is, for a zoning variance, is to be a condition of the land. And it's not a condition of what somebody wants to do. It's whether a condition of the land, the shape, the topography, something to do with the land makes it unusually difficult to do something that would otherwise be permitted, then you're entitled to a variance. I know
Could they
that
do a PCD or something like that, though, that would allow this? Could they do a plan development that would allow this? That would allow a higher structure?
that would be a possibility. And sometimes that's not really suitable, but that it is a possibility because variances, exceptions can be built into the plan development.
So if I could respond to that element, if the property is not entitled, and we're looking at industrial recruitment here, if the property is not entitled when we get the inquiry and we've got to go through a 5-month rezoning or even a few months of a variance of some type, those opportunities will pass us by. And so it just gives us a little more flexibility in that recruiting element. Staff will follow Plan Commission's wishes on this, but I just want to provide you that information as to why we brought it forward and what we were encountering in some of our industrial recruiting activities.
Is there any other mechanism that we could put into place here other than that would give us the capability to deal with this on a one-off basis without having to go through the entire thing other than changing the ordinance?
I hesitate to say that there's not, but I can't think of one off the top of my head. We can certainly, with planning staff, take a look at that and see if there's another option. I really can't think of what it would be. Because it would not probably be appropriate to have that subject to the approval of the planning director to make that kind of an exception. We wouldn't want to delegate that kind of I think we would get in legal trouble to delegate that kind of authority to a staff member to make exceptions for this. And in the past, I think the city has been perhaps overly flexible on granting variances for a variety of things in the past. We have tried to tighten that up, and I think generally have tightened that up, that an applicant for an exception has to show that there is a condition of the land that requires the variance. So again, I don't want to say no, but we'll look and see if y'all would like us to do that.
The only example I can think of are institutional group assemblies, but they require a special use permit. A steeple on a church can exceed the height of the rest of the building, but that's during the special use process with the BZA. And so if these are permitted by right, I don't know if that could play in at all.
I would say that maybe the easy way to deal with this, in my opinion, would be that, I would be okay with this kind of idea under certain circumstances. So I'm trying to think of how would we deal with that? Through a plan development where we would know what the circumstances are. If that's gonna not be sufficient for us to, bring in, industry or whatever, then what if we have you guys put together some language in here that's similar to the light scenario? Yeah, you can have a 100-foot accessory structure, but only if you're completely surrounded by other industrial or, something like that might make us all a little more comfortable that you're not gonna put a 100-foot accessory tower right next to a
Neighborhood.
right next to a subdivision that people are gonna be up in the tower all day long, looking down into people's backyards and windows. So I don't, I'm sure there are some things in play with that. I'm just kinda saying, to get to that number, I probably would need to have a little bit more, I need to probably tighten that up somehow.
We would be glad to look at,
What's the distance requirement?
so, right now, the way it's written is if they are 100 feet, they're subject to additional setback requirements. So as far as additional standards, the proposed amendment is saying that you have to have a minimum distance of 200 feet from any contiguous property zoned or used for residential purposes as measured from the lot line of any contiguous residential property. So the 200 feet is what, let me make sure I'm in the right place.
That's where you would have to play it. You could play it where basically it could be 500 feet, which is gonna knock out anybody close, or 1,000 feet.
Something
You
like
could play with that number.
Yeah, sure.
And then really get them far away from the residential neighborhood. So it may be a lot that's right next to the residential neighborhood. If we put it in now, they could be 200 feet. But if we put 500 feet in there, they couldn't use that lot, but they could use another lot.
Or even the structure itself, kind of like we're talking about the lights, if the structure is 500 feet away, then maybe that, for many residents, then that might make.
So, and the only reason I say that is because on the industrial board, he's right. If we can't give them an answer, they're gonna go to the next community.
I'm looking for a
That will
way
give
to
them
make
the
this
answer,
happen,
yeah.
not to not make it happen. I'm looking for a way to make it happen. I just don't want a carte blanche. I just
Yeah,
don't want a carte blanche, 100-foot tall.
It occurs to me that there are three things you could do. You could up the height for the entire industrial district, like Knoxville, and have 90 feet or some height higher, and so that both structures are allowed to be taller. You could increase the distance requirement, or you can narrow down the type of accessory structures, because right now it's all accessory structures can be 100 feet. So you could say, well, these type of structures could be. And so I think those are three areas that, if your feedback, we could integrate. I think certainly it's malleable at this point. We could integrate whatever feedback you have.
Can we get you guys to kind of work on it?
Well, if you look in the, I think it's the first page, maybe of the draft ordinance under Section 3, Appendix A, it has to be equal to its height from any contiguous property line. It has to be a minimum of 200 feet from any property line that is used or zoned residential. So it's based on the use at the time of the application, or it is zoned for residential, whether it's used that way or not. So, a vacant residential property would still carry the same protections as a property that's used for residential at the time. And keeping in mind that they're already allowed to go to 75 at their setbacks. So you could be at 75 feet at your setback. We're saying to go for an accessory structure, it can only be at 100 feet from the property line, or 200 feet from residential.
For me,
And
for
and
me,
the
I
normal
think the number
setback
should
is,
be
what, 42 feet on a residential? Is that, no?
So that would be from the street, the 42 feet, because
Right.
that would be a front. So it would be
Side
either a
setback.
side or a rear, so it was probably 20 feet or,
So right now, they could go 75 feet, 20 feet from the property line.
20 feet from the property line.
yeah. And the buffer is 15 feet or 20 feet, 20 feet.
For residential, it's...
Residential is 20 feet.
Right.
But the zoning ordinance says that you can place additional buffer requirements. Yes, certainly. And so an example would be on Joby Jackson Parkway. There are some townhomes adjacent to an industrial building. And I think as the planning department, when we look at that, we look for opportunities not to recreate that because the shadow of that wall, which is not 75 feet, by the way, can,
But could be.
yeah.
It could be. I think the eave height or the gutter height on that's probably a 35 or a 40-foot tall building. Which it's a commercial storage, and usually their storage heights are around 35 feet clear inside the building. So that's probably about a 35 to 40-foot eave height. So I know we had some concerns on this before, feels like we still do. This is not a mission-critical item for us. It's really something we thought would help our ability to market industrial properties, for economic development here in the city. But if you're hesitant to do that, I'm like you, Mr. LaLance, I don't want to hold up the other beneficial changes to the zoning ordinance for this. And so perhaps if you were to eliminate this from the amendments, and then it would just come to the city council with the other two elements, and then we can study this further.
Personally, I'd prefer it stay here at the planning commission till this body makes an opinion on it or forms an opinion on it, instead of just skipping it. I mean, I would say
Well, I think
I
he's
would go
talking
forward.
about just letting parts of it move on.
Oh, the flood, you talking about just the floodplain part or just the parts? that-
Right. Well, just talking about the industrial, the building heights. I mean, we can pull that out
Be here.
and.
My opinion, we would keep that here. I mean, unless y'all all say, no, let's just go ahead and let the city council deal with it, but
No,
I would rather keep
Yeah,
it here.
I think we can
Yeah,
solve
yeah.
it.
So here's what I would propose, and everybody can kind of, if y'all want to, you guys want to move forward with something else other than this, I'm going to make it as a motion, just nobody second it. If plenty of people want to do this, but what I would say is that what we do is defer the light fixture portion of this until we can get a little bit more information on what types of the different lights are, and also defer the portion that is the maximum building height for industrial, and then move for approval on the floodplain zoning, which is section 34.
What about section 1?
Section 2, interpretations, definitions. I thought Margaret Ann, are we to skip section 2?
So section 2 is for the light poles, and I was trying to label these.
We would need to defer it as well. then.
Yeah.
If, I'll second that.
Well, let's get it.
Okay.
So, section 2, we're saying we would want to defer that
Yes.
right now. Section 18, because I think we have to vote, I think it'll make sense for us to vote on the sections that they've given to us here. So if there's things in the section 2, we're going to need to defer because of the light poles.
Yeah.
So section
In
2 and
section
3.
18, regulations of general applicability. Mr. Huddleston.
So let me offer one other suggestion. The modifications floodplain ordinance are not super time critical, so if we could defer this to the
The whole meeting? I mean, the whole,
day meeting,
That-
and that'll give staff, we heard your comments.
Yeah,
That way, we're not trying to do surgery on an ordinance here at the, in the council chambers. And we can bring it back with some additional information, and then we can, in that day meeting, we'll have a little bit more ability on knowing what changes need to go with what sections.
Okay,
And the only comment that I would make too is, with respects to the light fixture piece, is that we have a good instead of saying it's a blanket, whatever we're going to, 80 feet, 100 feet, what can we say this is the type of light fixture that would be a part of that 100-foot pole? Because without saying that, then, yeah, we've got the candlelight piece, restriction, we got the glare restriction that you talked about, but, which are, those items are comfortable, but to know that they're there. But the fact of the matter is, we're blanketing, if we could say you got a fixture similar to what's at Siegel Park, that it doesn't go, that it, like Rick was trying to relay, it's 5 feet from the light fixture, it's dark. I mean, if there's any more specificity associated with the fixture, that would be helpful.
I was thinking about that too, but as technology changes.
I get that.
Yeah.
But I mean, even if we said that it's not gonna go 5 feet, like you were talking about, it's dark 5 feet away from the light fixture. I mean, I'm making stuff up here, but,
Everybody gets the point, though.
yeah, exactly.
They know what we're trying to get
It
at.
sounds like you like the lights at Siegel, but then maybe stadium lights that you see at high schools might be a concern. Is that
Yeah,
right?
because the example I would give y'all,
Okay.
if where we live in, near the university, and so football field, no problem, okay? Baseball field, really no problem. But when they light up the soccer field, it lights up Greenland Drive. I mean, the houses that are across the street from the soccer field, it looks like it's Christmas Vacation, when Clark turns all the lights on. I mean,
You serious, Mark?
I would mention, we have little control over what.
absolutely, I
University
get
does
that,
with
but that's
property.
that's what you definitely don't want to happen.
So we could go take pictures of the fixtures at the light and the baseball, or the football and baseball fields, and kind of compare what that looks like to the fixtures on the light fields at MTSU to give us an idea of what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Okay.
Love some visuals in general, like setbacks and all the things, yeah.
I don't know if I'll even like the 75-foot that's currently there.
Don't get
Well,
any ideas.
All right, so look, I need to
Okay.
scratch my initial motion, and I'll make a motion that we just defer this until the day meeting.
No, second.
16th.
We have a
16.
motion and many seconds. All in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Thank you all very much. Appreciate all the staff's work and helping us through this.
Yeah, thanks for putting that together. That was very, very helpful.
He impressed us all.
That's what he meant to do. So then, next, we have staff reports and other business, and we have one item that we know of under there, and it is a mandatory referral to consider the abandonment of a water and sanitary sewer easement located on property at the southwest corner of South Church Street and Westgate Boulevard. Josh Hutchison of Fulmer Lucas applicant. And Ms. Kerr is not here.
Yes.
Ms.
But
Kerr?
she's also at the
Yeah,
conference.
she's at the conference.
They're all having fun.
They left you here.
Short straw. That's right. Thank you again, Chair Jones and Planning Commission members. This final item on our agenda is for you to consider a mandatory referral action. If this were something that were going to come up at the March 16th meeting, it probably would have been under consent agenda because it's in good order, specifically because the request that's before you is for a MAPCO that's on South Church Street. It's an old gas station, if you've seen it there, and you can see it actually is also on Westgate Boulevard. And there have been a couple site plans the Planning Commission through the years have reviewed, but they haven't moved forward with redevelopment. At this point, they are interested in moving forward with redevelopment, and what that means is that an existing recorded sanitary sewer easement line runs along the property line, and it does not have any infrastructure in it, but the sewer was dedicated with the plat. Because the lots will be combined and they will be redeveloped, the easement is no longer needed. The Murfreesboro Water Resources Board considered this matter, and they are forwarding to you tonight their recommendation. The recommendation is to abandon that easement because it is not necessary. And of course, the next step would be that it goes to the City Council for final decision. But we ask, and the Water Resources Board ask, that you place the following two conditions on approval if you do choose to recommend approval tonight. The first is the applicant must provide to the city legal department all necessary documentation, including any needed legal descriptions and exhibits required to prepare and record the legal instrument. The legal instrument will be subject to the final review and approval of the city legal department. And then the second one is the applicant will be responsible for recording the legal instrument, including paying any recording fees.
Yep.
No public hearing is required.
I'll make a motion, we approve this with the staff comments, including the two that you just mentioned.
Second?
Motion and a second. All in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Green. Any other staff reports or business tonight?
Nothing for me?
Ms. Green? Mr. Hudson?
Nothing from me.
All right, then we stand adjourned.